The energy regulator Ofgem has just announced the next price cap for, October to December, last quarter of the year. £1,923 for the average household in England, Wales and Scotland. That's dropping from just over £2,000 in July.
Not dropping a lot, though, is it? Analysts say a typical annual bill could be £150 cheaper this winter. But with reduced help from the government and higher fixed costs for many, will we actually see much difference in what we pay?
Let's hear from the Director of Export Unlocked, Richard Bartlett, who joins us this morning. Good to see you, Richard. Look, I guess that there's various arguments here. We may not see a huge difference in our pocket, but if the government isn't bailing us out, we benefit in different ways.
Yeah, good morning, Anne and Stephen. Good to see you this morning. Yeah, I mean, it's a positive that we're seeing a little drop in the cost. Obviously, predicting it's lower than since 2021, but it's still high, and it's still high to the consumer. Obviously, people paying by direct debit are paying a reasonable amount. It's still very high, and we're going to see. Depending on how winter comes. I mean, if we have a cold, snap winter, it's a worrying sign for elderly and other people that even though it's been reduced, it's still a high cost no matter how we look at it.
Now, last year we had a bit of help from the government to pay these bills. We're not going to this, or what do you think? Will we get any help from the government this winter?
I think there'll be a bit of pressure there, Anne. I think there'll be pressure from people pushing that on government. It'll be interesting to see what happens. There is a worry that there won't be much help there, but I think there's a lot of pressure, and obviously we've got elections on the way, so we might see a bit of generosity by the government. But again, we're not seeing much from it, so that's always the worry. And this now the time to start looking at your energy costs and start looking around. We've never really suggested that in the past, but maybe it's a good time now to start looking what you're spending, because we just pay direct debit, we pay it every month. Are we in credit? Are we not in credit? What are we actually physically paying? I think I'm in credit by about £480 on my bill. And how does that affect many people? There's a lot of people in that situation who don't pay by direct debit. And this is the one thing we forget about, Anne and Stephen, that, that's the biggest worry to me, is there going to be support there for the people who really, really need it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in that sense, there's an argument to be made, isn't there, for not having universal support like we have all enjoyed and actually doing it in effect, means testing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I always think that the most vulnerable, we've highlighted this on GB News for the last over a year now, and we've really seen the vulnerable really affected when they're having to use meters, they're having to go to the shops to get the cards, get the money on there. And you make a choice when you're in that situation. You got really high bills. You start switching off things. Obviously, I've got an 89-year-old mother who worries about heating. She's very fortunate. She's got myself. But how does that affect people who don't have that support from family? How does that support the vulnerable people? That's always the worry. So, yeah, it's a difficult one. And I always think they don't look at it's the vulnerable who are affected more than anybody.
The vulnerable, but also depending on where you live as well. For instance, we've already had a viewer, Yvonne, morning Yvonne, get in touch saying, inside my house in North Shropshire at the moment, it's only 15 degrees. I've had my central heating on now for the second time this summer. So maybe it's about where you live as well and how cold things get.
Yeah, I mean, I'm up here in Saddleworth on the Saddleworth Moors. We get extreme cold weather here in the winter. So again, depending where you live, what areas you're in, it affects different ways. And I've always said in the south of England, it always seems warmer than it is in the north where I live. And it's, yeah, I mean, if you're at home, and the other thing you've got to think, and if you're sat at home, or a lot of people now working from home. So when you're working from home, you have the heating on a lot. When you're elderly, you have the heating on. And my biggest fear with that is that people, particularly the elderly or the vulnerable, start switching off rooms where they're not particularly using, and it just ends up no heating there at all. And that has a huge effect because they're just heating pocket rooms, which, again, that concerns me.
Yeah. Richard, it might be colder up north, but we all know it's a little bit better. There's no arguing.
Hearts are warmer.